My name is Kaelia, and Brenda's laughter was the soundtrack to the exact moment my confidence shattered in front of everyone I called my friends. We were at Marco's apartment, at one of those weekly get-togethers we'd started having since college. The atmosphere was light, full of trivial anecdotes and the clinking of ice in glasses. Until it wasn't. Brenda, with that smile of hers that always seemed a little too rehearsed, a little too bright, decided the conversation needed a more personal twist. My twist. She was talking about the importance of being authentic on social media, about how she always showed her true self with her luxuries and her struggles. And then she turned her body toward me, capturing the attention of the other 6 people in the room, and said, "Take Kaelia, for example. She's the perfect success story. People see a stable girl now with her job and everything, but they don't know her real story. Right, Kae?" I felt the air in my lungs turn thick and heavy. The background murmur of other conversations died down, or at least it seemed that way in my head. All eyes fell on me. Brenda didn't wait for my response. She continued with a falsely compassionate tone that was 1,000 times crueler than pure malice. "Come on, don't be shy. Tell them what it was like before, when your family lost everything and you had to, rely on the generosity of others, on the food boxes from the church and the secondhand clothes. It's such an inspiring story." And then she let out that laugh, a short, sharp laugh that cut through the silence, designed to give others permission to find my humiliation amusing. That secret wasn't an inspiring story. It was the most painful and private memory of my childhood. I had told it to Brenda 2 years ago, on a night when we were both incredibly vulnerable. Her grandmother had just passed away, and she was crying inconsolably, talking about how alone and scared she felt. To comfort her, to show her that I understood what it was like to feel fragile, I opened a door to my past that I kept under 7 locks. I told her about the silent shame in the food bank line, the mothball smell of donated coats that never felt like your own, the look of pity in the eyes of my classmates' parents. I entrusted her with the weight of that childhood shame, and she had saved it like a weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to use it. And this, apparently, was the perfect moment. For her. I could feel the heat rising up my neck to my cheeks. I didn't look up, but I felt the curious and on some uncomfortable stares. No one said anything. The silence of my supposed friends was almost as painful as Brenda's words. Marco, the host, cleared his throat and started looking for something on his phone. Camila shifted her gaze to the window. Their inaction was a form of complicity. On the other hand, Brenda stared at me, reveling in her power, in having made me small, in having reduced me to an anecdote of poverty for her and her audience's entertainment. She, who curated every second of her life on Instagram to project an image of effortless wealth, weekend trips to Bali, new designer bags every week, dinners at restaurants where a single dish cost what I earned in a day. As I felt myself shrink on the couch, as my mind was a whirlwind of shame and rage, something curious happened. A part of my brain, the part that wasn't hurt, the analytical part, activated. It's the part I use in my job, a job that Brenda and the others had always subtly belittled. To them, I'm Kaelia, the one who does little things on the computer. They don't understand what I do. They think I design birthday cards or choose pretty colors for websites. The truth is, I'm a user experience architect and a front-end developer. My world is systems, data structures, the invisible logic that makes the digital world work. I build the skeletons on which others hang their pretty skins. And as Brenda kept talking, now dismissing my reaction as if I were overly sensitive, my mind began to do what it does best. analyze a flawed system. And the system was her. Her digital life, that facade of luxury and success, was a perfectly designed user interface. But like any interface, it relied on a database, an underlying structure. And I knew, from little comments she'd let slip over the years, from inconsistencies in her stories, that her database was corrupt, that the structure was unstable. She boasted of a social media consulting business for which no one knew any clients, of sponsors who never tagged her back, of a family wealth that didn't add up with the story of her parents that I knew. She saw me as Kaelia the poor kid, the simple, quiet friend who served as a contrast to make her shine brighter. She had no idea about my hidden asset. It wasn't about money or status. My power was the ability to see the code behind the image, to understand the architecture of a lie. And in that precise moment, sitting on that couch, feeling the echo of her laughter, I made a decision. She had revealed my most intimate truth to humiliate me. I was going to reveal her most intimate truth to show the world the difference between the authenticity she preached and the falsehood she practiced. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. I was going to do what I do best. I was going to build something, a digital mirror, so elegant and functional that it would reflect every crack in her fraudulent life of luxury. She thought the battle was fought with words and popularity in a circle of friends. She was about to find out that the real war would be fought on my turf, with my language, code. It's a strange feeling, to feel completely invisible and at the same time the center of a joke. I wonder how many of you have been through something like that, where someone who was supposed to protect you used your vulnerabilities to feel bigger. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt underestimated. It would really help to know I'm not alone in this. And if you're interested in stories where the truth finds its way in the end, I invite you to subscribe so we can keep sharing them together.
The ride back from Marco's apartment was completely silent, but my mind was a hive of activity. The initial shock, that paralyzing cold feeling, was melting away, leaving a clarity as hard and sharp as glass in its place. When I got to my small studio apartment, I didn't turn on the TV or stare at the ceiling. I went straight to my workstation, the place where I felt most powerful, most myself. I turned on my 2 monitors, and instead of opening my client projects, I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. I named it Project Mirror. The first file I created wasn't a line of code, but a simple text document. In it, I wrote down Brenda's words, the ones she had used to humiliate me, word for word. Below that, I started listing every inconsistency, every little lie I had heard her tell about her life over the past few years. This wasn't an act of impulsive anger. It was the beginning of an investigation. The first escalation came quickly. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Brenda. "Hey, Kay, I've been thinking a lot about the other day. I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable. Sometimes my way of encouraging people is a bit direct. You know I admire you a ton." I read the message 3 times. It was a masterpiece of a non-apology. There was no, "I'm sorry for what I said." There was no, "I was wrong." It was designed to make me feel like the problem was my reaction, my sensitivity, not her cruelty. I called her. I needed to hear her voice. I needed more data. On the phone, her tone was syrupy, almost patronizing. "Kaelia, seriously, it's not a big deal. It was just us, the group. I did you a favor. Now everyone sees how strong you are." "Brenda," I said, my voice calmer than I felt, "in what universe is humiliating someone doing them a favor?" There was a pause. "Well, if you put it like that," she said, and I could almost hear her shrug through the phone. "Look, to show you everything's cool, I need your help with a little thing. Something super quick for you." And there it was, the second pillar of her pattern, the absolute belittling of my profession. My lifestyle blog, the one I use for my personal brand, looks a little weird on mobile. I'm sure it's just a button or something you can fix in 5 minutes. Can I send it to you? She sent me the link. and while she talked about how busy she was closing a deal with a yacht company, a lie so blatant it was almost comical, I opened her page's developer console. What I saw was a digital disaster. It was a cheap WordPress template, riddled with outdated and conflicting plugins. The code was a labyrinth of poorly written statements, a mess we call spaghetti code. The images of her luxury travels were so compressed to load quickly that inspecting them revealed pixelation and amateur editing artifacts. Even worse, I found hidden affiliate links in almost every other word, most of them broken. She wasn't building an empire, she was keeping a raft made of sticks and string afloat, and the raft was sinking. I told her the problem was more complex, that it would need a complete restructuring. She laughed. "Oh, Kalia, you're always so dramatic. I don't need to rebuild the Taj Mahal. Just fix a button. Forget it. I'll ask my nephew who knows about computers." And she hung up. In my Project Mirror document, I added a new section, Technical Analysis of Digital Assets. I documented everything, the cheap template, the vulnerable plugins, the broken links. The first solid piece of proof. A few weeks later, at a coffee shop, Brenda was at it again. We were with Camila and another friend, and I was excited about a personal project I was working on, a platform for local artisans to create high-quality digital portfolios for free so they could compete with big brands. I was explaining how clean architecture and image optimization could tell a much more powerful visual story than a simple Instagram profile. Brenda yawned theatrically. "Sounds very niche, very cute," she said with a chilling condescension. Real people, the people moving money, aren't interested in those little local things. They need scale, global impact, viral strategies. She dismissed my idea, my passion, as if it were a middle school science project. The coup de grace came 2 weeks later. Brenda announced on her Instagram with great fanfare the launch of her new Initiative for Entrepreneurs, a 5-page, poorly designed PDF full of cliches that she was selling for $50. She called it the Viral Portfolio. She had taken my concept, ripped the heart and soul out of it, wrapped it in her empty corporate jargon, and slapped a price tag on it. The humiliation was profound. She had not only scorned me, but had tried to monetize a perverted version of my own idea. That night, I worked until 4 in the morning. Not on my clients' projects, but on mine. On Project Mirror. I designed a new section for the website, an interactive timeline. On the left, one of Brenda's posts. On the right, the evidence that refuted it.
Gathering proof became my nightly ritual. I was a digital archaeologist unearthing the truth. I traced the images of her travels. The photo of her relaxing at a luxury resort in the Maldives was actually a stock image from a hotel, her figure clumsily photoshopped in. A forensic analysis of the image revealed inconsistencies in lighting and edges. Under a pseudonym, I contacted the original photographer, who confirmed the photo was his and that he had never worked with Brenda. The limited edition bag a designer friend gifted her was a high-quality counterfeit. How did I know? Because in her eagerness to show off, she posted a high-resolution photo where you could see the leather stitching was uneven, a flaw unthinkable in the authentic brand. I screenshotted replica luxury forums where users described that exact same knockoff, bought from a Chinese website. The masterstroke came from her supposed business. I searched the registration for her Brenda Lux Consulting. No such company existed. Her blog's domain was registered to her personal name, not a company. I searched her name in freelance and business registries. Nothing. Her empire was an Instagram account and a blog that, as I already knew, was falling apart. Every piece of evidence was meticulously cataloged and uploaded to my private server, ready to be deployed on the website. Each proof was another brick in the edifice of truth I was building. She hammered the final nail in her own coffin without even realizing it. One day, while we were having lunch alone, an attempt on her part to keep up the appearance of our friendship, she complained about how hard it was to be rich. "It's exhausting, Kay. Last week I had to spend almost $10,000 on a new wardrobe for a conference in Miami. Sometimes I wish I had a simpler life, like yours."
She said it while looking directly into my eyes, a direct and deliberate jab designed to remind me of the story she told at the party, the story of my family and money. She wanted me to feel small, poor, inferior to her. But I no longer felt shame. I only felt the cold, satisfying weight of the facts I had accumulated. In my head, as she spoke, I was designing the CSS animation for the evidence gallery on my site. I was deciding which font to use for the headlines that would expose her lies. She thought she was playing social chess, moving her pawns and bishops on a board of coffee shops and parties. She didn't know I was building a rocket, and the rocket was almost ready for launch. The perfect opportunity arrived in the form of an invitation on glossy paper with gold lettering. Brenda was hosting a brand launch and success celebration party at a downtown art gallery. She was going to officially present her empire to the world, or at least to our small world. She invited all our friends, supposed influencers, and business partners. It was the perfect public stage. The climax, her own arrogance, had written for my story. I held the invitation in my hand. The website was complete, hosted on an anonymous server, and ready to be indexed by Google with a single click. I had the domain, the proof, the design. I had the truth packaged and ready to be delivered. I accepted the invitation with a smile. The architect was ready to show the queen just how fragile her house of cards truly was. The art gallery was bathed in a cold, white light that made everything look more expensive and less real, a perfect reflection of Brenda herself. The air smelled of a mixture of perfume, cheap white wine served in flute glasses to look fancy, and the subtle desperation of people trying to seem important. I moved through the crowd feeling strangely serene, like an anthropologist observing the rituals of an unknown tribe. I saw Marco and Camila near the bar, laughing loudly at something a man in a suit that was a size too shiny was saying. They saw me, offered a small, tense smile, and quickly returned to their conversation. Loyalty, like the champagne, was cheap that night. At the center of it all, like a sun queen in her solar system of sycophants, was Brenda. She wore a blood-red dress that demanded attention and moved through the room not as a host, but as a deity accepting offerings. Every laugh, every handshake, every photo for Instagram was a calculated transaction to reinforce her own mythology. I stayed on the periphery, near an abstract sculpture of twisted metal that I found to be good company. In my pocket, my phone felt like a dense, heavy stone. Inside it, on a browser tab, the admin interface for my project mirror was waiting. There was only one large green button that said Publish. The entire site, every piece of proof, every screenshot, every line of code that dismantled her lie was just a single touch away. But I waited. Launching the website was no longer an act of retaliation. It had become an act of justice, and justice requires precise timing. Finally, the lights dimmed slightly, and a generic, instrumental version of a pop song filled the space. Brenda stepped onto a small, makeshift stage in front of a huge screen. Behind her, a projector displayed a logo she had designed herself, her name in a pretentious script over a tacky digital watercolor splash. It looked like something from a free template from 2012. "Welcome, everyone," she exclaimed in a voice she had practiced to sound both humble and authoritative. "Thank you for coming to celebrate the launch of my brand, my passion, my truth with me. Brenda Lux Consulting." My finger brushed against the glass of my phone. Truth. What an interesting word to choose. Her speech was a torrent of corporate cliches and toxic self-help. She talked about manifesting success, creating your own reality, and monetizing your authenticity.
Every sentence was a walking contradiction, and I was perhaps the only person in the room who could see the irony in all its glorious hypocrisy. As she talked about her strategic partnerships with global luxury brands, I thought of the broken affiliate links I had found. When she mentioned her market research trips to Monaco and Dubai, I remembered the stock photo of a hotel with her badly cropped silhouette. It was like watching a magician perform for an audience, unaware that you're seeing all the strings from backstage. And then, she made her final mistake, the act of arrogance that sealed it all. But success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up, she said, adopting a tone of false benevolence, the same one she used on me at Marco's couch. She scanned the room, and her eyes deliberately landed on me. I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone here tonight, an old friend, Kalia. I felt 100 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. The familiar heat rose up my neck. Kalia is the personification of struggle. She has been through hardships that many of us can't even imagine. The murmur in the room was one of morbid curiosity. She was doing the exact same thing as at the party, but on a much larger scale. She was using me as her charity case, as the before to her glorious after. And because I firmly believe in giving people opportunities, she continued, her smile now full of a poisonous pity, I want to publicly announce tonight that I have offered Kalia an internship position at Brenda Lux Consulting. A chance for her to learn from the real world of business, to get out of her little world of computers and see how real empires are built. The insult was so perfectly calculated, so multifaceted, it humiliated my past, belittled my present, and denigrated my future in a single elegant stab. The room filled with scattered, confused applause. People were clapping for her supposed generosity. I saw Camila smile pityingly in my direction. In that moment, the world slowed down. I took my phone out of my pocket. My thumb hovered over the green button. This was it. This was the moment. But then, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the air. It wasn't mine. It came from a man in his 50s, elegantly dressed in a suit that didn't need to shout its price, who had been watching everything silently from the side. Excuse me, Ms. Brenda? Did you say that young woman's name is Kalia Rojas? Brenda blinked, thrown off by the interruption. Yes, that's right, Kalia Rojas. As I was saying, I'm offering her and... That's what I thought I heard, the man interrupted. He turned slightly so more people could see him. My name is Alejandro Vargas. A complete silence fell over the gallery. Even I knew who he was. Alejandro Vargas was practically a legend, a venture capitalist and the founder of Syntax Ventures, one of the most respected tech and digital design firms in the country. He was the kind of person Brenda could only dream of having in her contact list. Kalia Rojas, Vargas continued, now looking directly at me with an expression of recognition. You're the architect behind the Nest project, the platform for artisans? I nodded, unable to speak. My heart was pounding against my ribs. Vargas smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, addressing the entire room, for those who don't know, the Nest project won the National Digital Innovation Award last month. The submission was anonymous, judged purely on technical merit and social impact. My team and I were on the judging panel. We were absolutely blown away. The elegance of the code architecture, the intuitive interface, the human-centric design philosophy. It was, without exaggeration, one of the best executions we have seen in years. He turned back to Brenda, whose face had drained of all color. Her signature smile was frozen in a grotesque grimace. My head of talent has been trying to contact Miss Rojas for the last 3 weeks, Vargas continued, his tone calm but sharp as a scalpel. We've offered her a position as head of user experience design at Syntax, a position with a 6-figure salary and equity in the company. So far, we haven't been lucky enough to get a response. He paused and glanced at the cheap logo projected behind Brenda. "So, you'll understand my surprise to hear you're offering her an internship to learn about the real world. With all due respect, miss, from what I can see of your brand, I think you're the one who could learn a thing or two about how to build something of real value in the 21st century." The silence that followed was the loudest I have ever heard. It was a dense, heavy silence, filled with the implosion of a lie. I watched Brenda's universe crumble in her eyes. The humiliation she had intended for me was returned to her 1,000-fold, not by my hand, but by the irrefutable hand of truth and authority. People weren't looking at me with pity now. They were looking at me with awe, with respect. I saw Marco desperately trying to catch my eye, a forced smile on his face. I saw Camila stealthily approaching, as if she had been on my side all along. In the midst of that silent chaos, with Brenda's vacant stare fixed on me, I did what I had come to do. Slowly, with a calm I had never felt before, I looked at my phone screen. My thumb rested on the green button that said, "Publish." It was no longer a necessary act for my vindication. Mr. Vargas had gifted me that. Now, it was an act of closure, an act for myself. It was the publishing of an obituary for Brenda's fake life and for the version of myself that allowed people like her to make me feel small. I pressed the button. Somewhere on the vast network of the internet, www.google.com/search=projectmirror.com had just been born. No one in the room knew it yet, but it didn't matter. I knew, and I was free. The moment my thumb lifted from my phone screen, a wave of absolute calm washed over me. It wasn't the feverish euphoria of victory, nor the bitter satisfaction of revenge. It was stillness, the kind of silence you feel after a storm that has lasted for years. The show was over, at least for me. I didn't need to see the crowd's reaction or Brenda's devastated face. Her opinion, and the opinion of everyone who had been complicit in their silence, had ceased to hold the slightest weight in my universe. With the echo of Alejandro Vargas's speech still ringing in the gallery, I turned around and walked. I didn't run. I walked with my back straight, past the twisted metal sculpture, through the doorway, and out into the cold, anonymous city night. The sound of the party faded behind me, and with every step, I felt like I was shedding an old, heavy skin. The days that followed were strangely silent. My phone, which used to buzz constantly with notifications from the friend group, remained mute. There were no furious calls from Brenda, no confused texts from Marco or Camila. It was as if, by exposing the falseness of their sun, the entire solar system had collapsed into a black hole of shame. I didn't search for my website on Google or check the traffic analytics. I didn't need to. The site's existence wasn't for public consumption. It was a declaration of principles. It was a monument to the truth. And monuments don't need an audience to be solid. I knew it had an impact a week later when I received an email from one of the influencers who had been at the party. It was short. "I saw your website. The proof is irrefutable. Thank you. I just canceled a collaboration with her. I owe you one." And that was it. It was enough. Some might call what I did revenge. I understand why. It's the easiest word, the closest at hand. But in the quiet of my apartment, as I unmounted the Project Mirror folder from my hard drive, I realized it wasn't that. Revenge is a fire that consumes you as much as it does your target. It's hot, chaotic, and leaves you empty. What I did was cold, methodical, and precise. It wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of architecture. Brenda had spent years building a false narrative about me. The fragile girl, the charity case, the unambitious employee. And at the same time, she built a false narrative about herself. The successful entrepreneur, the luxury guru, the self-made woman. I didn't destroy anything. I simply built a parallel structure, but with a foundation of truth. I placed her lies next to the proof, her facade next to reality, and let people decide which building was solid and which was a cardboard set.
It wasn't a punishment. It was setting a boundary in its most definitive form. It was my way of saying, you do not have permission to write my story. You do not have permission to use my vulnerabilities as stepping stones for your ego. You do not have permission to exist in my life as a force of humiliation. The website wasn't an attack. It was a firewall, a defense system that made it impossible for her or anyone else to use ambiguity and gaslighting against me ever again. The truth, once documented and presented irrefutably, is the most potent antidote to manipulation. A week after the party, I called Alejandro Vargas's office and accepted a meeting. I was nervous, but it was a different, exciting kind of nervousness. When I sat in his office, a minimalist space with a breathtaking view of the city, he didn't mention the party. He just had my portfolio open on a large screen. We talked about code, design philosophy, and the ethical responsibility of tech creators. He treated me not as a protege, but as a colleague. At the end of the meeting, I accepted his offer. Not for the money or the prestige, though those were significant factors. I accepted because I felt I was entering a place where value was measured by the quality of one's work and the integrity of one's character, not by the number of followers or the labels on one's clothes. It was the world I had always wanted to belong to. Of Brenda, I know very little, and that is a blessing. Her social profiles went private, then disappeared. The blog with the broken button she never fixed now shows a 404 error. The empire had evaporated because it was never real. I suppose she now faces the most difficult task of all, living with herself without the shield of her own fiction. I don't feel joy at her downfall, but I don't feel pity either. I feel a serene acceptance that consequences are the natural result of actions. She chose to build her house on the sand of deceit, and when the tide of truth rose, the house collapsed. It's the law of physics. It's the law of karma. Today, my life is quieter, but infinitely richer. I have new colleagues who challenge and inspire me. I'm leading a team that is building tools that genuinely help people. And I've learned the most important lesson of all. My sensitivity is not a weakness. It is the engine of my empathy and creativity. My analytical nature is not boring. It is the source of my strength and my ability to see the truth. And my story, the one I was so ashamed of, is not a stain. It is a testament to my resilience. Brenda tried to use my past to define me, and unintentionally, she succeeded. I am now defined as a woman who not only survived adversity, but learned to use her scars to build an unbreakable future. I have learned that your worth isn't given to you by anyone. You build it yourself, line of code by line of code, decision by decision. I've learned that protecting your peace of mind sometimes requires making incredibly difficult decisions that others might judge. But in the end, your well-being is your responsibility. And that makes me want to ask all of you, have you ever had to build a wall, not out of hate, but out of self-love? What was the hardest decision you ever made to protect your peace? Share your stories in the comments. Let's build a community where self-respect isn't just admired, but actively supported.